You're home alone and the house is quiet. Nobody else is there. The doors are locked. You know this. And yet, walking past a dark hallway, the back of your neck prickles. Something in you insists you are being watched. There's no one there. But try telling that to your body. That feeling isn't random, and it isn't fear talking nonsense. It's one of the oldest alarm systems your brain has, and it was built for a reason that has almost nothing to do with ghosts. Here's the strange part. Your eyes can't actually see anything behind you. Your ears can only catch so much. So where does that sensation come from? The specific, unmistakable feeling that eyes are on you when no eyes are there at all. The answer starts with something scientists call agency detection. Your brain isn't just processing raw sensory data, it's constantly asking a background question. Is there an agent here? Something that can act, something that can decide, something that can watch. And it asks that question far more often than it needs to. Psychologist Justin Barrett, who studies the cognitive science of belief, gave this system a name: the hyperactive agency detection device. The idea is simple once you hear it. A rustle in the bushes could be the wind. It could also be a predator. If you assume wind and you're wrong, you're dead. If you assume predator and you're wrong, you've wasted a second of attention. Those two mistakes are not equally costly, so evolution built a brain that leans hard toward assuming agency, even when the evidence is thin. That single design choice explains an enormous amount of human experience. It explains why you see a face in a wood grain pattern, a cloud, an electrical outlet. It explains why a creak in an old house sounds like footsteps, not settling wood. And it explains why an empty room can still feel occupied. Feeling watched is agency detection running without a target. Your brain has flagged the possibility of a watching presence, even though there's no actual person to point at. The alarm fires anyway, because for most of human history, false alarms were cheap and missed threats were fatal. But agency detection alone doesn't explain everything. There's a second piece, and this one is about what watching does to behavior, which turns out to be almost as powerful as watching itself. In 2006, researcher Melissa Bateson ran a study in a university coffee room. For 10 weeks, an honesty box collected money for tea, coffee, and milk, based entirely on the honor system. Above the price list, the researchers alternated two images week by week, a picture of flowers and a picture of a pair of eyes. Nothing else changed. Same drinks, same prices, same people. The weeks with eyes above the box brought in almost 3 times as much money as the weeks with flowers. Nobody was actually watching. It was a photograph. Flat, printed, incapable of seeing anything at all. And still, people paid more, simply because eyes were present in their field of view. Around the same time, researchers Kevin Haley and Daniel Fessler ran a related study using an economic trust game and found the same pattern. Subtle eye images on a computer screen barely noticed consciously made people more generous, more cooperative, more careful about how they behaved. Think about what that means. Your brain doesn't require certainty that you're being watched to start behaving as though you are. It just needs a cue. A pair of eyes, real or printed, is enough to flip a switch that governs how honest, how careful, how self-conscious you become. Now put those two systems together. Agency detection tells your brain to assume a watcher is possible. The IQ effect tells your brain to change its behavior the moment that assumption gets triggered. In an empty house at night, in dim light, with a mind already primed by unfamiliar shapes and unexplained sounds, both systems fire at once. The result isn't superstition. It's two separate, well-documented cognitive mechanisms overlapping in a moment that has no actual observer at all. This raises an obvious question. Why would a species evolve to feel watched constantly, even in solitude? Wouldn't that be exhausting? It would be, and in some ways, it is. But for most of human history, being watched wasn't just a possibility. It was the default condition of life. Small hunter-gatherer bands rarely experienced true solitude. Someone was almost always nearby, someone was almost always paying attention, and reputation inside that tight social group mattered enormously. Being seen behaving badly could mean losing access to food, protection, or a mate. Being seen behaving well could mean the opposite. In that environment, a brain that defaulted to assuming a watcher, even when unsure, would consistently make better social decisions than a brain that defaulted to assuming privacy. The cost of occasionally feeling watched while alone was small. The cost of behaving badly in front of an actual audience, again and again, because you underestimated how observed you were, would have been much higher. So the system got tuned toward false positives. Assume you might be seen. Behave accordingly. That single rule, repeated across hundreds of thousands of years, shaped a nervous system that still can't fully switch off, even now, in a world where actual solitude is common and actual privacy is achievable. This is where it gets genuinely strange. That ancient wiring didn't disappear just because modern life created real, private, unobserved spaces. It's still running underneath everything. It's why people behave differently when a security camera is visible, even a fake one. It's why a simple sticker of an eye on a bicycle can reduce theft in a parking lot. It's why some workplaces post photos of watching eyes near supply closets and see shrinkage drop. None of these are people being watched. They're people whose ancient agency detection system got triggered by a symbol and whose behavior shifted in response, exactly the way Bateson's coffee drinkers shifted for a photograph of flowers versus eyes. Even online, this shows up in disguised form. People behave differently when their username is visible versus anonymous. Comment sections with real names attached tend to be less hostile than ones where identity disappears entirely. The watching doesn't have to be real. It only has to be plausible. Which brings us back to that dark hallway. The prickling on your neck isn't malfunction. It's not superstition bleeding into a rational mind. It's a system that spent the overwhelming majority of its evolutionary history being right more often than it was wrong, still running its old calculations in a world that has changed faster than your nervous system has caught up. Your ancestors, who assumed they might be watched and adjusted their behavior accordingly, tended to survive their social groups better than the ones who assumed the opposite. That assumption became default. It became automatic. And it became something you carry with you into every quiet room, every empty house, every unfamiliar dark space, whether or not anyone is actually there. Understanding this doesn't make the feeling disappear. The hyperactive agency detection device doesn't read footnotes. It doesn't care that you now know the mechanism behind it. It will keep firing in dark hallways for the rest of your life, the same way it fired for every human before you. But now, at least, you know what that feeling actually is. It isn't a ghost. It isn't a sixth sense. It's 100,000 years of social survival strategy still checking, out of habit, for eyes that were once almost always there. You're home alone, and the house is quiet. And somewhere underneath that quiet, your brain is still watching for the watcher, just in case.